If you like electric cars, this really seems to be the time to be alive. There's so much EV stuff coming out right now. There's cool cars, boring cars, slow cars, fast cars, ugly cars, pretty cars, big cars, little cars, everything. This one, to me, is all of the above, just about. Now, don't get mad at me, because out of all those adjectives that I used, I did compliment this car in one way or another, but let's see how it goes with this full-fledged electric performance car from the Korean brand. Let's get started. So this thing sitting in my driveway and standing next to me is the 2025 Hyundai Ioniq5 N in Atlas White. This is about a $500 option, but other than that, this doesn't have any other options on it, bringing the MSRP of this thing to about $68,000. And that's a lot of money, but if you want to spend just a little bit more, you could go over to Acura and look at the ZDX Type S. That thing starts at about $75,000. These cars are crazy expensive because the Ioniq5 N isn't built in North America. These are still assembled in Korea. These are not eligible for that $7,500 tax credit. However, the normal Ioniq 5, which is built here, is. If you're well versed with your Ioniqs, you'll remember that a normal Ioniq can make up to 320 horsepower with that dual motor setup. This one has been amped up to make pretty much double that, which is crazy. This thing is making an enormous 601 horsepower from its dual motor setup. Of course, because it's dual motors, power goes to all four wheels, and this thing can appropriate torque between the front and rear motors to really make this thing feel either four-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. This thing can actually kick the tail out if you want to. Again, it has that ELSD, but before I get too far ahead of myself, 601 horsepower and 568 pound-feet of torque. If you want a little bit more of that, you can press that red button on the steering wheel, the N-Grin boost button, and make 641 horsepower. It's only for a few seconds, but you can notice the difference. 0 to 60 for this sub 5,000 pound non-fuel injected vessel is just about 3.3 seconds. There's not much I need to talk about. There's no engine. Under the hood, as you can see, there isn't a frunk, but you can see all the innards of the front electric motor. Hyundai does also let you access some of the fluids, like the washer fluid, the coolant, and brake fluid, but because it's electric, there's not much to it. Hyundai rates this performance-injected Ioniq to get a range estimate of about 220 miles. Realistically, I think you're gonna see between 180 and 190 miles with this thing. In terms of charging this thing, I'm going to give you the realistic numbers rather than what the brochure will tell you. First of all, with the included level 1 charger that you get, and remember this is the least powerful charger that your car can plug into because it just uses 110 volts, so a normal power outlet. This will charge your car from about 0 to 80% in about 3 to 4 days. I'm not kidding. If you want to charge this a little bit faster, you can either buy a level 2 charger yourself, or you can go to a level 2 public charger. Good luck around this area, because that will take between 5 to 7 hours to get this to about 80%. But the first thing I notice all these people advertise is the level 3 fast charging capability. In my area, I've tried 3 different days in a row at about 4 different chargers. None of them work, and maybe if 5 of them work, 1 of them does work, and then the others are occupied or just offline. There's no realistic way for me to do level 3 charging in my immediate area, but Hyundai does say if you can do that, you can charge this from 10 to 80% in under 20 minutes. But good luck finding that. If you have that, then it's great. This thing is plugged in and charged all the time. For me, it does not work. And it's not even been that cold yet, so I haven't even needed the heat or the heated steering wheel. So It just does not work for me. Since these have come out, the Ioniq 5s have had deceiving dimensions because they don't look as big as they are, at least on video and pictures. But this is sitting at 185 inches long, making it about 5 or 6 inches longer than normal SUVs like a Toyota RAV4 or a Honda CR-V. But this is about 12 inches shorter than the current Acura ZDX, one of its performance EV rivals. Again, because Hyundai wants you to know that you're in the N model, we're riding on 21-inch alloy wheels that are specific to this model. They do look cool on this one, but I would honestly prefer a 20 because these ride just a little bit too rough. In addition to the wheels, Hyundai added their N electronic suspension, which is adaptive suspension, and it can make the suspension ride firm in N mode or sport mode, or soft like in normal or eco. The overall shape of the Ioniq 5 N remains the same. However, you'll notice the body kit, the wider fender flares, it does look overall more aggressive. There's bigger intakes for the front to cool this thing down, and it's riding on 4 piston front brake calipers and huge front rotors. Now, because of its non-traditional shape, the Ioniq 5 and the Ioniq 5 N aren't the most practical SUVs in the world, but compared to the competition, not too bad. Of course, we have a power tailgate. This does also feature Hyundai's Smart Access tailgate, where if you just stand here for 3 seconds, it'll open. It does get a little bit annoying, so it's turned off on this one, but you can see it's a really usable amount of space for the size of this car. Behind the second row seat, there's about 27 cubic feet of volume, and it is a 60-40 split, thankfully, so if you want a little bit more space, you can get up to 60 cubic feet of volume. I know I keep saying this, but because this is not shaped like a traditional SUV, you do lose some volume. There is a little bit of storage underneath the floor, enough that you can include the charger that the car comes with, and also the the draft of the window sticker and the owner's manual, but not much else can fit back here because the batteries and the drivetrain take up all that space. And in terms of towing with your Ioniq 5 N, don't. Welcome to the spacious rear seat of the Ioniq 5. The Ioniq 5 has already impressed me, even the normal ones, because of the massive amount of rear space back here. First of all, you can see that because this one is the N, we have Alcantara for the front and rear seats, and also a combination of leather as well. This rear seat does thankfully recline with a lever back here. It also is the same lever you use to fold the seat down as well. There's also an armrest with 2 kind of small cup holders, very usable though. Thankfully, there's 2 USB Type-C ports. There's also air vents. You do have fancy things like light up N emblems in the front seats. While we're back here, I'll appreciate the rear seat because it not only reclines like how I showed you, but if you want more trunk space, you can still slide the seat forward and also back. I'm 5'9" and the seat is all the way back. The driver's seat is in my driving position. I can fit my feet under the seat and I have inches of legroom. So it actually is quite nice in the second row of this, but that wasn't a surprise to me. So to begin our range test, we must get accustomed to the interior of this. So welcome to the interior of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 N. It's not too different from the normal Ioniq 5, but there are some differences between the models, of course. Primarily the seats and also the steering wheel. First of all, so we can get going and start our range test, this is the key fob for the Ioniq 5 N. It's Hyundai's typical key fob, but in this case, it's black. You have the lock, unlock, remote start, panic button, and then the trunk release is actually right here. But because of this, you have push button start, so we can just keep this anywhere inside the car, put your foot on the brake, and press the start stop button to go. The first thing we can do, I'm gonna start off in normal mode, and I'm not really gonna drive too crazy right now, but we will get onto this straight road here and see how the power is. That's crazy! That's crazy. It really has been a while. It's been like 2 days since I drove this last, so the thrust really took me off guard. That's funny. When you're driving normally, the Ioniq 5 N is actually pretty smooth on normal surfaces, but because of these 21-inch alloy wheels, you do feel all the bumps in the road. It does get quite rough. So I let this thing charge at my house. I know with the level 1 charger, it definitely is slower, but I let this charge at my house with the level 1 charger that's included with this car for 2 full days. And I started off at about 10% charge, because I actually tried to do a range test before this, but the charging infrastructure in my area isn't that strong. I went to, I think, 3 or 4 different chargers, and I could not get any charger to work, so I gave up. But after sitting charging for 2 days, starting at 10%, it got me to 60%. So at least it'll get us through our activities for today, but if I was going anywhere farther, it would be annoying. In terms of saving range, this thing does have a few things up its sleeve. It has an eco mode, and it of course also has one pedal driving, also known as Hyundai's I-pedal. It also does normal regen braking as well. He's mad. Thankfully, for being a relatively large car, this doesn't feel too cumbersome when you're in the city like this. Today though, I'm gonna drive like how I normally drive. I'm not going to try and squeeze every single bit of efficiency out of it, because that's not real freedom to me behind the wheel. I want to be able to just drive like how I normally drive. Unfortunately, the people in front of me though aren't letting me do that in this area. Something I like about EVs is the one pedal driving, especially in traffic, because it's the equivalent of being in like second gear at a higher speed, because as soon as you let off the brake, well, as soon as you let off the throttle, it'll slow down, which is nice because you don't have to immediately reach for the brake pedal. I appreciate that road noise is thankfully at a low in this car for being an electric car, but I have heard a substantial amount of creaks and rattles in here. For being something at this price point, I wouldn't want to hear any creaks and rattles, especially because you don't hear an engine in this. I actually forgot about that. This car can fake engine noises. I actually kind of got tired of it. It's funny for like 10 minutes, but if you're actually just trying to drive, it does get pretty intrusive. Later today, I'll show you that jibber jabber. But anytime I drive an electric car, I just have it with no noise. I don't need any noise. If I'm driving an electric car, I don't need to be a poser. I appreciate that the throttle in this feels less like a switch by nature, and it actually feels like the go pedal instead of just like on, off, on, off. This thing handles well. Maybe we'll get into some corners later. I'm not too sure, but because this has a low center of gravity and because this is the Ioniq5 N, it's tuned to handle a lot better than the normal Ioniq 5, which handles pretty well already, but that feels pretty soft as well. This one has adaptive suspension. In normal mode, it's of course pretty quiet. This car is really chasing. On the highway, you can see it's pretty quiet. No complaints on my behalf. It's smooth. This is where I would say it rides better, but even in normal mode or eco mode, it still rides pretty rough, I would say. So I'm on the infamous DC beltway right now, which is very annoying to drive on, but just like every other beltway. But something, like a staple of the beltway, a particular corner, is Disney World. People think it's Disney World, but it's actually a Mormon temple. But it's just so annoying because everyone slows down to take a picture of it. And we're slowing down now for some reason, which I don't like. Thankfully, with the I-pedal, it's nice. Also, just so you know, when you are using the regen braking feature, it does turn the brake lights on. So if you keep touching the throttle and letting off, touching it, letting it off, your brake lights will go on and off. It's something that, I don't know, I get self-conscious if people think I'm hitting the brake for no reason, because I get annoyed when people do that here. It really is very smooth though. I have no complaints on my behalf. It handles well. In normal mode it handles well. The steering has a nice weight to it. It's confidence inspiring, but of course it just doesn't have the same feel that, you know, real performance cars have. This is just a different world to me. Thankfully, wind noise on the highway is at a low. It feels like a substantial car when you're driving it. It doesn't feel cheap. It's just crazy thinking about the price tag. God, this guy's an idiot. We can see how passing power is for a brief moment because of these left lane hogs. Whee! It's fun. And then you just accelerate so easily, just like the push of a button. But do not hog the left lane. There's so many people that hog the left lane. It's so annoying. I'll let this guy go. Wow, it gets to speed fast. That's crazy. That's funny. Good job. Yeah. That's crazy. The thing is great. It actually is very composed at highway speeds. I'm in normal mode. If I was in the N mode, it would be more fun. That's good. Yeah. See, you can't just drive slow. If you have the power, that's fun. Now, don't think that I'm in love with this car, because if you know me, you know what I like. But I do have to commend Hyundai for making an electric car that actually has more of a soul than some of the other cars it competes with. This, instead of it feeling like a blender, it feels like a nice Dyson vacuum. And as much as an old man as I may seem to be sometimes, I do like having an electric car as a daily driver. I like the idea of it because it's a car you can just hop in, you don't have to warm it up, you can just get in and unplug it and go. The only thing is, it really is a complete difference in lifestyle. You have to buy a charger, which, I mean, you're buying a car, you're buying one of these and that's not cheap, but then you have to buy a charger on top of that, or you have to rely on public charging, which in my area, public charging, all of the chargers are broken. I had no luck. I myself have actually not had the climate on, but take note that in the winter time especially, or if you live in colder climates, the battery range will be different compared to driving in the summertime or hotter climates. But just like really cold weather, these batteries don't like really hot weather either, so you will notice the performance will vary. But as we focus on the interior of this car, you'll notice it has a 3-spoked leather-wrapped wheel that's specific to the Ioniq5 N. You can see the N badge on it. There's a lot of buttons on it though. That was the first thing I noticed when I hopped into this thing a few days ago. On the left side, mainly those buttons control the cruise control settings and some of the driver assistance settings, as well as scroll through some of the pages in the gauges themselves. On the right side, those buttons control the audio and Bluetooth controls, and then you can see all these extra buttons on the wheel. The 2 N buttons enable the N mode. There's also the button to control the drive modes, and also this red button is an N grin boost button, which is like NOS for an electric car. Instead of the normal 600 horsepower this car gets, you can make 641 horsepower with this thing, so you feel the little bit of extra juice. The gauges are thankfully easy to read. They're pretty simple in typical Hyundai fashion, but you can see that this one has the turn signal camera, which I really like how not everyone does it, but most new Hyundais that are higher up in the trims will have that feature. As you can see behind the steering wheel, this does have paddle shifters. They also work as toggles to increase or decrease the regen braking. As we look at the center, this one has a 12.3-inch touchscreen display, which uses Hyundai's most recent version of their infotainment system. Thankfully, it's pretty snappy, pretty smooth. There is EV-related information in a whole section that lets you look at the battery percentage, and it also helps you look for chargers that may be nearby. So it is helpful, but I haven't really clicked into it. Mainly I'm just in Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and thankfully it supports both wired and also wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. This also has a 360 camera with a backup camera and also an abundance of camera angles, so you really shouldn't be curbing your wheels or backing into things, but I guess it does still happen.
Speed camera ahead, 35 miles per hour speed limit.
You can see, this is something you can actually, I learned you can turn it off, but it's buried. This car has a speed limit warning. It is helpful, but if you're listening to music, it just completely mutes it. And then it's like playing a game because it congratulates you when you pass the camera. Below all that, the climate controls are thankfully pretty easy. I'm glad that there are still physical toggles at least for the climate control, but they are all touch sensitive buttons, so it's not actual buttons that we're touching. Hyundai did think about connectivity for this car though, because there's USB-C ports everywhere, so you really don't have to worry about charging your devices in your Ioniq. In normal mode, you can see it drives pretty sweet. It's pretty smooth. Later, don't worry, we will get into the noises, but I'll be frank, the noises are, I mean, at least to me, the noises were fun for like 10 minutes, and then it started to give me a headache. So that's why I've just been driving this thing in EV mode. Well, in normal, quiet mode, just like how EVs should be. Thankfully, it handles well. Doesn't matter what drive mode you're in, because it has a low center of gravity. I also like how they've tuned the steering box too. The weight, it's just good. It's not like it's cumbersome to steer or anything like that. It's very easy to drive. So if you want to drive like an NPC, which most of the time I've been driving like an NPC in this car, it's pretty smooth and comfortable still. One thing is, because this is the N model, and definitely take note of this, the driver's seat and passenger side seats are not electric, they're manual. Ugh, you can see it's a little bit rough there. The seats are heated and cooled. Thankfully, there's also a heated steering wheel, so they did include all the, features that you would want, but of course, because the seats are manual, don't expect memory seats or things like that. There's really no noise to hear. I can be, like full throttle like this and just be whispering. Of course, you hear more of the wind noise, and there is a leaf that's been hitting the window. But we're just about ready to get into N mode, but I've just wanted to make sure that you can hear me, because it is loud. The last few things I wanted to talk about, the interior of this. I wish that the rear windows were auto up and down. It's only the front two windows. This thing also doesn't have a sunroof, doesn't even have a glass roof. A lot of EVs don't have moving roofs, but I don't know. We are now ready to go in N mode, and I'm not going to be like our friend on the internet driving through kid zone very quickly, but the car can give you the illusion that you're driving quickly though. I'm still in EV mode. You get more power, you feel more of that power when you're in that N mode. So I'm still in EV mode. I was still doing under 30 miles an hour, but I can turn on the party tricks of this car. This has an N active sound feature, and it also can do this thing called N E-shift, which can simulate not only just the shifts of a normal gas car, but also all the vibrations and the sensations. I'll turn it on. I'm already annoyed. It's cool, and sure, it's funny for the meme, but I mean, you can just redline the thing. I mean, but it's stupid. Why would you need to do that? There's no point to do that, just so you know. But it can also simulate up to 8 gears, and every time you shift, either with the paddles or if the car is doing it in normal drive by itself, you feel everything. It not only makes these noises in N mode, but it also makes these noises in normal mode too, so you can be a poser 24/7. Realistically though, I have not really used this sound thing in a serious manner. It is funny, you know, an electric car is making all these noises. It's just, I've lived with this car for a few days, but I'll let you listen. And it's very composed at high speeds. It's shocking at high speeds how good it is. You know, so in N mode, it's just the thing that, like, it's fun. It's fun, don't get me wrong. But it just makes driving quickly too easy. And I think that cars that, like, I don't think that most people, you don't need a car this fast. There's no reason. There's no reason. You do not need a car this fast. Why? Can you explain to me? And it makes those noises out of the back of the car too. Just like a normal gas car. It's so interesting. And you feel the shifts because it works with the regen braking to do that. And yeah, it's very interesting. It works just like a real automatic transmission too, because if I throw myself in 8th gear and floor it, it just lugs. It's interesting. So it is cool how they did this, but I'm already gonna say this will not make me want an electric car anymore. I would rather just have the real thing. Why have the fake? It's fun and it's cool and no one hears you doing it while you're outside. But it's not the same. I don't know. This thing does 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. We can see how that is. I'll let the car do it itself. I don't have a draggy. One day I'll get a draggy. Watch more and then I'll get a draggy. But you ready? And then the brakes thankfully do work. The brakes thankfully do work. Something that's interesting about this car as well is that you can change how the brakes feel. If you're driving in normal mode, you can have the brake response be softer and less touchy. But in N mode, you can have the brakes more touchy and responsive, so it's interesting. I would honestly just prefer them to be full response all the time because the brakes really feel weak when you're not in that sport mode. The turning circle isn't the best because of these big tires. Okay. It really just makes driving fast too easy. And that takes the fun away from me. Part of the fun of a gas car is actually putting effort into the drivetrain and hearing the drivetrain. I know I'm hearing the drivetrain now, but it's too much like a video game. If I wanted to do this, I might as well just sit at home and play Forza or something. I'm not going to buy a $70,000 electric car. There's no reason for me to do that. So this thing is getting picked up tomorrow, and the age-old question after every time I've spent a week with a car is if I'll miss it or not. This one? No. Should you buy this? I don't know. It really depends. No. Even though this certainly makes itself stand out compared to a lot of the EVs out there, I still would just rather get a normal Ioniq 5. Hyundai is also making an Ioniq 5 XRT, so if you want to take your electric toy car off-road and not be able to charge it in the woods, you can also do that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video with the new Ioniq 5 N. I don't want to dig myself any holes, so I'll see you guys in the next video. Again, thank you all for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing, but bye. Bye, peeps.